The palace was silent, though the corridors had once hummed with the laughter of children and the whispers of advisors. Outside, the evening sky was painted with crimson and gold, but inside, the heart of the kingdom was heavy. Princess stood on the balcony, her delicate fingers gripping the cool marble railing as tears threatened to spill from her violet eyes. Her mother, Queen, had passed away only days before, leaving a void that seemed too vast to fill. The echoes of her mother's voice still lingered in her mind. "You must choose wisely, my daughter. Hearts can be both fragile and powerful." His heart throbbed with a loneliness that was almost unbearable. She felt the weight of the crown pressing down upon her shoulders, yet it was not the burden of rulership that troubled her most. It was the emptiness inside, the absence of a connection that could pierce through the solitude. That evening, as the sun's last rays vanished behind the horizon, a messenger arrived. He was simple, dressed in the modest clothes of the village beyond the palace gates. His eyes, dark and unyielding, held a quiet determination. "Princess," he said, bowing low, "a traveler seeks an audience. He claims to carry a message from the human world." His curiosity stirred, but so did a sliver of caution. Humans rarely ventured into the kingdom of Astoria, a realm where magic and tradition intertwined. To see one here, especially alone, was unheard of. She nodded, signaling the guards to allow him passage. The man entered, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding yet gentle. His name was, and there was a sincerity in his eyes that immediately drew her in. "I mean no harm," he said softly, bowing before her. "I have come to ask for your guidance and perhaps your trust." Studied him, nodding the faint scar that traced his jawline, evidence of battles fought in lands she had never known. There was something human in him, something raw and unrefined, yet it carried a warmth that the walls of the palace had long her. She could not explain why, but her heart stirred in a way it hadn't in years. Days passed and remained at the palace under her careful supervision. He spoke of his world, of forests that stretched beyond the horizon, of rivers that shimmered like liquid glass, of people who laughed despite hardships unimaginable. Listened, enraptured, imagining a world beyond the palace walls, a world that pulsed with life and imperfection. One evening, as they walked through the moonlit gardens, a silence fell between them, reached out, gently touching her hand. The contact was electric, not in a fleeting spark, but in a steady, grounding force that seemed to root her very soul. "Princess," he whispered, "I have crossed worlds to find you, not because I was sent, not because I was told, but because I needed to." His breath caught. For the first time, the loneliness inside her seemed to shrink, replaced by a fragile hope. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because your heart called to mine," he replied. "Even before we met, I felt it. Even across the stars, I felt it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but this time they were not of sorrow. They were of recognition, of longing finally met. The walls she had built around her heart trembled, and she knew that nothing in the world could prepare her for what she was about to feel. When the court gathered for the evening meal, Father King noticed the subtle change in her demeanor. But it was Queen's old friend, Lady Selene, who first spoke the words that would ignite scandal and wonder alike. "Princess," she said gently, "who is this man who walks by your side with such familiarity?" His lips parted and a calm certainty settled in her chest. She looked around the grand hall, meeting the eyes of nobles, servants, and advisors. "He is my human husband," she declared. The room froze, a breathless silence falling over all. The words were both shocking and strangely inevitable, as if destiny had been weaving their threads long before anyone in Astoria realized it. Some gasped, some whispered, some looked at with suspicion, unable to comprehend the depth of this union, but stood firm, her hand brushing against, feeling the warmth that anchored her soul. For the first time, she realized that love was not just an emotion. It was a force strong enough to bridge worlds, to challenge expectations, and to ignite courage in hearts long resigned to solitude. And in that moment, as the candles flickered and shadows danced upon the walls, Princess knew that the story of her heart had begun, not as a whisper, but as a declaration that would echo across kingdoms, through human lands and magical realms alike. She had found him, and nothing, not even fear or doubt, could take him away. The days that followed declaration were anything but calm. The palace, once a place of routine and ritual, now seemed to pulse with whispers, curious glances, and cautious murmurs. Nobles questioned her decision in hushed tones, and advisors debated whether a union with a human could ever bring honor or disaster to the royal family. Yet through it all, Princess held her head high, her hand intertwined with, drawing strength from his quiet presence. He, too, remained composed, understanding the weight of her choice and the courage it demanded. Father King called her to the council chamber one afternoon. The sun poured through the tall stained-glass windows, casting fragmented rainbows across the marble floor. The king's eyes were stern but not unkind. He began, voice measured, "This man, your human husband, can he survive in Astoria? Our ways, our laws, our people, they are not simple. They may reject him, and perhaps even you, for this choice." Met her father's gaze unwaveringly. "Father, love does not conform to laws or customs," she said softly. "Has proven his heart, his courage, and his loyalty. That is all that matters. The rest will follow." King studied her, searching for hesitation or doubt. He found none. Slowly he nodded, a silent acknowledgement that her conviction was unshakable. "Very well," he said, though a shadow of concern lingered in his expression. "But understand, my daughter, the path you have chosen is dangerous. Not all hearts are noble, and not all hands are gentle." The tension in the palace only grew when envoys arrived from neighboring kingdoms. They had heard rumors of the princess's unprecedented union and came with veiled threats and cautious curiosity. Some whispered that such a marriage could weaken Astoria, while others predicted chaos. Faced them all with a calm dignity that astonished even the most skeptical nobles. He spoke with honesty, with passion, and above all, with respect for the kingdom that had never known him. Watched him navigate this world, so foreign yet now so entwined with her own. Every gesture, every word he uttered was a testament to his resolve, not to impress but to belong. And in her heart, she marveled at the human capacity to rise, to adapt, to love fiercely despite fear. One evening, as twilight painted the palace gardens in shades of lavender and silver and wandered among the roses. The scent was heavy, almost intoxicating, mingling with the quiet murmurs of the wind. "Do you ever regret coming here?" asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Shook his head, lifting her hand to his lips. "Never," he said. "I have faced storms in my world, battles I thought I could not survive, yet none were as terrifying as the thought of living without finding you. Every moment here, every look, every word, reminds me that I am exactly where I am meant to be." His chest tightened, a mixture of love and fear swelling inside her. "But this world, it may not accept us," she said. "People may hate you, fear you, even try to harm you for being human." Smiled, though his eyes held the weight of understanding. "Then we will face it together. If fear is the enemy, we shall be its conquerors. If hatred rises, we will meet it with patience. Because love is stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than any kingdom's rules." Tears threatened again, but this time they were not of sorrow. They were of relief, of awe at the resilience of a human heart. Pressed her forehead to his, feeling the warmth that radiated through him, grounding her, strengthening her. She realized that love was not passive. It demanded courage, defiance, and the willingness to endure storms that others would never understand. The palace guards, once wary and distant, began to notice the subtle change in the princess. Her confidence shone brighter, her laughter returned in small, unexpected moments, and the human by her side moved through the halls with a quiet authority that could not be ignored. Slowly, the walls of suspicion began to crumble, and even the coldest nobles could not deny the bond that tethered their princess to this stranger from another world. Yet beyond the palace, the outside world stirred. Rumors spread across the lands of a princess who had chosen a human over the wealthiest lords, over kings and princes from distant realms. Some saw it as a rebellion, others as folly, but no longer feared judgment. Her heart had chosen, and in that choice she found a power she had never known. The power to defy expectations, to embrace love without apology, and to redefine the very meaning of courage. And so, under the silver glow of the moon and stood together, hearts aligned, ready to face whatever trials the kingdom, or the world, might cast before them. Theirs was no ordinary love. It was a love that could bridge worlds, challenge destiny, and illuminate the human spirit in a way that even magic could not. Winter had begun to settle over Astoria, and the palace gardens were cloaked in frost, their once bright blooms reduced to brittle skeletons. Yet inside the walls, a storm of a different kind raged, one of suspicion, expectation, and the quiet resistance of those who could not comprehend the princess's choice. Even as and shared tender moments, the kingdom whispered, and the shadows lengthened in corners where loyalty had once seemed unshakable. One morning, a letter arrived bearing the seal of the Northern Council. Its message was succinct but chilling. The union between a princess and a human was an affront to tradition, an act that could destabilize not only Astoria but every allied kingdom. "Your choice endangers us all," it read. "Recall the human or face consequences no love can defend against." His hands shook as she held the parchment, the paper seeming too fragile for the weight it carried, placed a steadying hand over hers. "We will face this," he said softly, eyes meeting hers with unwavering conviction. "Together." But resolve alone could not shield them from the fear creeping into the palace. Servants who once smiled now avoided their gaze. Advisors murmured doubts behind closed doors. Even some of the guards, loyal to the kingdom above all else, questioned whether a human could survive within these walls, not just physically but politically. Wandered through the halls, her heart heavy. She had always believed in love and its quiet, transformative power. Yet now the world seemed determined to test it, to twist it into something fragile and breakable. She felt a pang of doubt, fleeting but sharp. "What if I am wrong?" she whispered in the privacy of their chambers. "What if love is not enough to protect us?" Cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. "The measure of love is not in ease or comfort," he said, his voice firm but tender. "It is in endurance. It is in choosing each other even when the world turns against us. That is how we survive and how we thrive." His words, steady and unwavering, rekindled the flame of courage within her. She realized that her love for him was not a rebellion, but a declaration of strength. To abandon it now would be to abandon herself, to deny the very heart that had guided her through loss, through fear, through longing. Days passed and tension mounted. Envoys arrived from rival kingdoms, their eyes sharp, their tongues sharper. They questioned his lineage, mocked his humble origins, and suggested that his presence was a threat to the royal bloodline. Yet with every challenge, he remained calm, respectful, and unyielding. His strength was not of steel or magic, but of conviction, a quiet force that began to win even the skeptics over, if only in small, begrudging ways. Watched him navigate these treacherous waters, her heart swelling with admiration and love. Every time he faced scorn, every time he met suspicion with dignity, she felt a new dimension of courage awaken within herself. She realized that human hearts could endure extraordinary pressure and still shine with brilliance, a lesson she had not learned within the gilded halls of her own lineage. One night, as the moon rose high over the frosted palace, a distant rumble shattered the quiet. Guards ran to the ramparts, shouting warnings of approaching forces, raiders from the northern borders emboldened by the kingdom's perceived weakness. Panic rippled through the palace but stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Stay calm," he said. "We can protect this kingdom not through fear but through strategy and unity." Felt a surge of pride and awe. This human, this man she had chosen against all convention, was not just surviving in her world. He was shaping it, protecting it, defending it with the same courage that had drawn her to him in the first place. She realized that love was not only a bond between hearts but a shield against chaos, a source of strength that could move mountains and calm storms. As the raiders approached, the palace gates were fortified, archers took their positions, and every soldier prepared for battle. Yet in the midst of the chaos and shared a fleeting, silent glance, a promise that, no matter the outcome, their hearts were intertwined, unbreakable, unshakable. The night would be long, the battle fierce, but something had changed irreversibly within Astoria. It was no longer just a kingdom of tradition and duty. It was a kingdom where courage, love, and human resilience had begun to carve a place, a mark that could not be erased. And in the cold moonlight, as snow began to fall softly around the palace towers, Princess knew that the trials ahead were not merely tests of survival. They were tests of the heart. And she, with by her side, was ready to meet them all. The palace shook under the pounding of hooves and the distant roar of battle. Outside the walls, the northern raiders pressed forward, their numbers vast, their intentions merciless. Inside, the corridors were a flurry of armored feet, shouting guards, and anxious whispers. Yet amidst the chaos, Princess moved with purpose, her hand clutching, as they oversaw the preparations together. Fear had its place, but it would not rule them. Love would. The raiders had assumed weakness, a kingdom distracted by scandal and rumors of a princess who had chosen a human. They did not anticipate the fire that burned within these walls, the unity forged by a bond that transcended bloodlines, kingdoms, and tradition. Though human and unfamiliar with Astoria's arcane defenses, adapted quickly. His mind worked like a sharpened blade, assessing, strategizing, coordinating with the captain of the guard. Watched him, breath caught in a mix of awe and love. His courage was not born of magic or royal command. It was raw, human, and extraordinary. Hours passed as the raiders pressed forward. The clash of swords and shields echoed through the outer gates, and the scent of smoke and iron filled the air. His heart throbbed painfully with each cry from the battlefield. She wanted to run, to hide, to protect him, but she could not. Had chosen this path, and so had she. Together, they were both part of a story that demanded bravery beyond the ordinary. As the battle reached its peak, a massive trebuchet launched flaming projectiles toward the palace walls. Guards scrambled to extinguish the fires, but a strike hit the eastern tower, collapsing part of the rampart. Gasped as debris rained down, and in that instant she saw a raider sneaking past the weakened defenses. Before she could react, lunged forward, intercepting the intruder with a strength and agility that seemed almost unnatural for a human. He disarmed him, sending the raider sprawling, then turned to her, eyes blazing. "Are you safe?" She nodded, trembling, and he pulled her into a protective embrace. The warmth of his body, the certainty of his presence, grounded her in a world that had momentarily turned into chaos. "We are not alone," he said. "They may strike with swords, with fire, with fear, but our bond, it cannot be broken." The battle raged for hours, yet with every strategy suggested, every defensive maneuver he executed, the tide slowly turned. Astoria's defenders began to push the raiders back, regaining ground lost in the initial assault. The kingdom that had doubted him, that had whispered about his origins, now witnessed a human whose courage could rival any knight born of noble blood. When the sun rose, painting the frost-kissed landscape in soft gold, the battlefield outside was quiet. The raiders had retreated, leaving behind a but victorious kingdom. Guards and citizens alike emerged from the shadows, their eyes wide with awe and newfound respect. They had seen the human who had stood beside their princess, fought alongside their warriors, and refused to yield even when the world seemed determined to crush him. Stood atop the highest tower, the morning wind whipping her hair around her face. Joined her, his armor still smudged with soot and dirt, his expression calm but intense. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heartbeat against hers, steady and unwavering. "You saved them, saved us," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of her hair from her face. "No," he said gently. "We saved each other. Every choice we made, every risk we took, it was because of love, because we believe in what we can be together. That is stronger than any army, any siege, any fear." Tears blurred her vision as she leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace push back the shadows of doubt and grief that had haunted her since her mother's passing. In that moment, the kingdom was not just a place of politics or tradition. It was a home built upon resilience, trust, and the extraordinary power of human love. Word of the battle spread quickly throughout Astoria. Whispers of admiration replaced those of doubt. Nobles who had once frowned upon the union now nodded respectfully, their faces reflecting a quiet awe. Even King, watching from his chambers, understood that this was more than a visitor. He was a partner, a protector, and in ways the king could scarcely comprehend, a force of hope for the entire kingdom. That evening, as the palace settled into a fragile calm and walked through the gardens, now illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns, the frost sparkled like diamonds under their feet, and for the first time in weeks, the princess allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel joy without reservation. She realized that love was not merely about quiet moments or tender words. It was about standing together in the storm, refusing to yield, and finding beauty even in the wreckage of what had been broken. Looked up at, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I always wondered if love could really endure," she admitted, "if it could truly survive the impossible." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "It can," he said simply, "because we endure it together, and as long as we do, nothing in any world can ever take it from us." In that instant, amidst frost and ruin, amidst the lingering echoes of fear, Princess knew a truth deeper than any she had learned in her royal upbringing. Human hearts, when joined in love and courage, could defy destiny itself. And this truth, more than crowns, walls, or armies, would guide the rest of their journey. The aftermath of the northern raid left Astoria wounded but resilient. Yet while the kingdom healed its walls, whispers grew louder, and not all eyes watched with admiration. Some nobles questioned whether the princess's choice had invited the attack in the first place, whether a human at her side was a vulnerability rather than a strength. Even allies from neighboring realms looked upon Astoria with guarded eyes, uncertain whether they could trust a kingdom led by a princess who had chosen love over convention. Princess felt the weight of judgment pressing down upon her shoulders. The celebration for the kingdom's survival was muted, replaced with cautious smiles and polite words, yet in the quiet of their chambers remained her constant anchor. "Let them doubt," he said one evening, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Their doubts do not define us, our hearts do." She nodded, but inside, the unease gnawed at her. She had always believed in the power of love, but now she wondered if courage alone could shield them from the whispers and schemes that stirred like a storm beneath polished surfaces. She feared the poison of doubt more than the clashing of swords, for it could erode the strongest bonds without ever showing itself openly. A council meeting was called, and the room was thick with tension. Advisors and nobles gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and concealed hostility. "Your Highness," one voice began, hesitant yet sharp, "we must consider the implications of this union. The people of Astoria may admire bravery, but will they accept a human as part of the royal bloodline? Can a kingdom truly be safe under such uncertain circumstances?" Held her head high, Feeling's hand brush hers beneath the table. "Astoria's strength has never come from blood alone," she replied firmly. "It has come from loyalty, courage, and the willingness to protect what we love, embodies those qualities, not because he is human, but because he is unwavering in heart and action. That is what makes him fit to stand beside me." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some respectful, some skeptical. Yet before the debate could escalate, a messenger burst in, face pale with urgency. "Your Highness, scouts report a distant army moving through the eastern plains. They carry banners of a rival kingdom, and their speed suggests invasion. They know of the northern raid, and they seek to exploit our perceived weakness." The room erupted in tension. Guards tightened their grips on swords, advisors whispered frantically, and felt the familiar surge of fear mixed with resolve. She looked seeing in his eyes not hesitation but determination. "We face another storm," he said quietly, "but not alone. Together we can endure." The coming days were a blur of strategy and preparation. Studied the maps of the eastern plains, consulting with generals while trained beside the soldiers, offering guidance, sharing tactics, and inspiring confidence. The human who had once seemed fragile in the eyes of the court now stood as a pillar of strength, proving that courage and loyalty were not bound by birthright or blood. Yet amidst the flurry of war preparations, a subtler battle brewed within herself. She grappled with moments of doubt, wondering if her love was enough to protect him from both the dangers of war and the scorn of the kingdom. Sleepless nights were filled with visions of him hurt, of whispers turning to actions, of loyalty crumbling in the face of fear. But each time doubt threatened to overwhelm her, she felt his hand, steady and warm, reminding her of the bond that had weathered the northern raid, the bond that would endure again. One night, while the palace slept under a sky of stars and stood on the balcony, the distant horizon glowing faintly with the fires of preparation. "Do you ever fear?" she asked softly, voice trembling. "Not for the battles outside, but for us, for this love." He turned to her, face illuminated by the moonlight, eyes deep and unwavering. "Of course I fear," he admitted. "I fear loss, failure, the world turning against us, but fear does not mean surrender. Fear is a signal that we care deeply, that this bond is worth every risk, and I will face that fear because I will face it with you." Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed her forehead against his. In that moment, she realized that love was not just comfort or joy, It was defiance. It was standing firm when every force sought to divide, to weaken, to challenge the heart. It was courage in its form. The next morning, as the first light of dawn touched the palace towers, scouts reported that the rival army had crossed into Astoria's lands. The kingdom braced once more for war, yet this time knew their strength was not only in the walls or weapons, but in hearts united by love, trust, and unshakable courage. The trials ahead would test them beyond measure, but she also knew that whatever came, they would endure together. Because human hearts, when anchored in love and conviction, could rise above kingdoms, armies, and destiny itself. And hers was entwined with his, inseparably, forever. The morning mist clung to the plains like a shroud, and the distant sound of marching feet carried across the cold air. Astoria's army, though weary from the northern raid, had been reinforced, organized, and inspired by a human who had become more than a visitor, had become a leader, a symbol of courage, and a living testament to the power of love. Princess rode at his side, the wind tugging at her hair, her heart thrumming with both fear and resolve. The rival army was larger, disciplined, and merciless. Scouts reported their banners swaying in the chill wind, the glint of weapons promising devastation. Yet as looked at, standing firm in the center of the training field before the troops, her fear transformed into awe. He did not merely command, he inspired. The soldiers, once uncertain of a human's place among them, now found strength in his presence. His voice carried over the ranks, steady and unwavering, reminding them that courage was not born of blood alone, but of conviction, heart, and loyalty. Hours before the battle, the princess found a quiet moment. She stood atop a hill overlooking the plains, the sun rising slowly, painting the earth with strokes of gold and red. "Do you think we can truly hold them?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, though the chill wind stole much of it. Turned to her, eyes intense, unwavering. "I do," he said simply. "Not because we are the strongest, but because we do not fight alone. You, me, this kingdom, we are united. That makes us stronger than any army." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with a familiarity that had grown over months of trials, whispers, and quiet moments of shared courage. "I am afraid," she admitted, the truth raw and unguarded. "Not just for me, but for you, for us. What if this battle changes everything?" Grip tightened, firm and grounding. "Then we will face it together. Fear does not weaken us, it reminds us what matters. And I will not let anything take you from me, not war, not whispers, not destiny itself." The battle began with the clash of steel, the roar of war horns, and the relentless pounding of hooves. Astoria's army, bolstered by strategies and unwavering presence, met the enemy with both discipline and ferocity. The plains became a chaotic tapestry of courage and blood, fear and defiance. Fought alongside the soldiers, moving with precision, defending the weak and inspiring the hesitant. His human limitations did not hinder him. Instead, his empathy, quick thinking, and unwavering heart made him a force none could anticipate. Though trained in royal etiquette rather than combat, moved among the injured, offering solace, guidance, and encouragement. Her voice rang out across the field, firm yet gentle, reminding the soldiers that the princess they served was more than a figurehead. She was a heart that beat alongside theirs. Hours stretched into an eternity. The enemy pressed forward relentlessly, yet each wave met a wall of resolve built by love and loyalty. Bleeding from a shallow cut along his arm, refused to step back. He shouted, voice echoing across the battlefield, "We are stronger than this, together." At the worst moment, when the enemy seemed poised to break through the eastern flank, his courage crystallized. She called upon the reserve troops, directing them with a clarity born not of training, but of an understanding of human will and unity. The tide turned. Soldiers, inspired by their leader's bravery, with renewed vigor, pushing the enemy back and regaining lost ground. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the plains in shades of crimson and gold, the enemy began to retreat. Astoria's army, battered but unbroken, had survived. The princess and the human who had become her husband stood together at the center of the field, bloodied, tired, but victorious. Pressed herself against, tears streaming freely, the exhaustion and relief overwhelming her. "We survived," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "We truly survived." He held her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Yes," he said, his voice rough from the day's struggle but unwavering. Because we faced it together, because our hearts, our love, are stronger than any force in the world. In that moment, amidst the smoke, the blood, and the fatting echoes of war, realized something profound. Love had not merely protected them, it had transformed them. It had created courage where there was fear, unity where there was doubt, and hope where there had been despair. Astoria was more than a kingdom. It was a testament to the resilience of the human heart, guided by love that refused to yield. As night fell and the survivors tended to the wounded, Princess looked up at the stars, feeling steady hand in hers. "We've been tested," she whispered, "and we endured." Smiled, his gaze fixed on hers with unshakable certainty. "And we will continue to endure," he replied, "because as long as we face the world together, nothing can ever take us apart. Nothing." And under the quiet watch of the heavens, a princess and her human husband stood together, victorious not only over armies but over doubt, fear, and the limits of expectation. Their love, tested and forged in the crucible of trial, shone brighter than any crown, stronger than any blade, and unbreakable even in the face of destiny. The battlefield had quieted, but the echoes of war lingered in the hearts of all who had survived. Astoria, though victorious, bore the scars of the recent trials. The walls were battered, the fields trampled, and the memory of fear still clung to the air. Yet within the palace, a different kind of victory unfolded, one that no army could claim, the triumph of love, courage, and human spirit. Princess walked through the halls, her hand resting on's. The courtiers watched, some with curiosity, some with quiet respect, others still struggling to comprehend the choice she had made months before. But no longer sought their approval. She only needed to know that she had chosen truth, heart, and devotion. Every glance she shared with reminded her that what mattered was not tradition, nor expectation, nor rumor. It was the bond that had sustained them through fire and fear. In the great hall, King awaited. His eyes were heavy with the weight of leadership, yet they softened as he looked upon his daughter and her human husband. He said quietly, "You have faced trials no princess has before, not with magic, not with armies, but with courage, heart, and love. I see now that my daughter's strength is not measured by whom she marries, but by the resolve of her heart." His eyes filled with tears. "Father is more than I could have ever imagined," she said. "He has shown me that love is not a weakness but a power, that courage can be human, and that hearts, when united, are unbreakable." Bowed his head respectfully. "Your Highness," he said to the king, voice steady, "I vow to protect Astoria, its people and princess, for as long as I live, not for power nor for glory, but because my heart belongs to this kingdom and to her." The hall was silent, yet the weight of his words filled every corner. Nobles who had once whispered doubts now met his gaze with awe. The truth was undeniable. This human who had faced prejudice, war, and scorn had emerged as a figure of unwavering loyalty and courage, and through his presence had grown into the leader she had always been destined to be, not through title alone, but through heart and conviction. Days passed and the palace began to heal. Walls were repaired, fields restored, and the kingdom began to breathe once more. Yet its journey was not marked by grandeur alone. It was the quiet moments, the subtle gestures, the warmth of shared glances and entwined hands that defined their love. They walked the gardens at dawn, laughed together in the kitchens, and whispered dreams beneath the moonlight. Every ordinary moment became extraordinary because it was theirs, shaped by trials, devotion, and unshakable trust. One evening, as the sun set in a cascade of crimson and gold and stood atop the highest balcony, the wind carrying the scent of blooming flowers, now resilient after frost. "Do you remember the first day you arrived?" asked softly, leaning against him. Smiled, eyes twinkling with memory. "I do. I was terrified, uncertain, yet drawn to you in ways I could not explain." "And now?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Now," he said, holding her close, "I know that the heart is limitless, that love can cross worlds, defy expectation, and withstand every storm. And I know that as long as we face life together, nothing can break us." Rested her forehead against his, tears streaming freely, a mix of joy, relief, and awe at the journey they had endured. "We have been tested," she whispered. "Through fear, through doubt, through war, yet we stand together, stronger than ever." Kissed her gently, And in that moment, every scar, every whisper, every trial melted into the quiet certainty of love. Astoria had been reshaped, not just by war, but by the courage of a princess who chose her heart, and by a human who had proven that love, in its form, was more powerful than any sword or decree. The kingdom celebrated quietly, not with fanfare alone, but with reverence for a love that had changed the very soul of Astoria. And as night fell, the stars shining over the palace, Princess spoke softly, yet with the unwavering confidence that had carried her through every storm. "Who is he?" The court had once asked in whispers. Now she answered with her whole being, her voice clear and proud. "He is my human husband, and together we are unbreakable." And in that moment, the world seemed to pause, bearing witness to a love that convention, endured trials, and illuminated the extraordinary resilience of the human heart.